Hi, I'm Kesenya from Guiding Star with Kesenya. Thanks so much for joining me for this special series all about Saturn and his transits through each of the houses in the horoscope. Some of you might be familiar with a video I've done in the past all about Saturn and his transit through the sign of Aquarius and where that's going to fall for each sign. This video series may be a little similar to that. We might cover similar topics of information. But there will also be more depth in this series, so I thank you for joining me for this ongoing series throughout this autumn. Can I also just say I would be so honoured if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel and support the work that I do here in growing the knowledge of astrology throughout Australia and the world. So what is Saturn, first of all? Saturn is the seventh planet out from the Sun, when we include the Sun in this counting astrologically. Saturn is also the last of the visible planets that we can see with the naked eye in the sky at night. Beyond Saturn, to see Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, we need a telescope. And so it's considered in ancient astrology that Saturn is the planet that actually the final frontier, if you like, that correlates to our visible earthly reality, the manifested reality on planet Earth in this incarnation. Beyond that, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto all have correlations to our inner self, our psyche, our past lives, our wounds, our personal issues, and the way we think about things and the way we integrate things into our lives. So they are very psychological energies, whereas up until Saturn, we have both psychological things happening from those planets, but also material manifestation happening from the planets that we can see. It's an old Hermetic principle, which is called as above, so below, as without, so within. What we see in the sky above us is reflected in our reality on the earth. And the old principle taken further is also what is going on energetically within our soul and our psyche is also reflected on the outer in our earthly life as well. So Saturn, being the furthest planet out as a material planet, as a planet of manifestation, governs most strongly what happens on planet Earth, and for our individual journeys as well. And the reason that is that the further out you go with the planets, the more impact that they have on our lives here on Earth. That might seem a little bit odd. We might ordinarily think that the closer the planet, the greater impact it would have on us. Therefore, Venus should be the most impactful planet of all. But that's not the case in astrology, and it's to do with the time and the speed of a particular planet. With Saturn, its movement is so slow that the energy has time to build and therefore really pack a punch. Where Venus, or the moon if you want, for example, as well, they whiz around the astrological chart very quickly. The moon goes around in 1 month. Venus goes around in approximately, give or take, a year, depending on whether she goes retrograde or not. But Saturn takes 30 years to do a cycle of the astrological chart. And therefore, the energy has a lot of time to accumulate in one spot. And therefore, we feel the impact most strongly. Saturn, as with all planets, has things that it rules, things that it governs in this earthly reality that we experience. Saturn rules over structures, organizations, hierarchies, governments, regulations and rules. Saturn is also known as Father Time. He governs time here on planet Earth. There are some realms where time doesn't matter. Time is immaterial. But here on planet Earth, we are governed by time as a spirit being manifested into human material form. We are governed by time, and Saturn is the master of time. Saturn also represents things like responsibility, duty, hard work, maturity, perseverance, and endurance in life. These are all actually really great things, and we tend to receive the blessing of these Saturn positive qualities when we start getting into our mid to late 30s. That's when Saturn matures in Vedic astrology, he reaches his maturation. And when he reaches his maturation, essentially, we learn how to carry our burdens in life. And everyone at some point needs to learn that lesson. Certainly by the age of 35, 36, when Saturn matures, we step into our full adulthood. We're no longer young adults, we're no longer children. We have fully reached maturity, and hopefully, if we're manifesting at a high level, we've learned how to carry our burdens. Saturn represents structures, as I said, but also traditions. He is the master of the legacy we want to leave behind as well. He has a connection with the 10th house in astrology, which is all about legacy that we want to leave for those who come after us. He also has a connection to authority figures and those in authority over us. Saturn, on the more negative side of his energy, rules restriction and blockage, fear, holding things back, keeping things from us, and starving us of the things we like, but also equally starving us of the negative things in life if he is making a particular aspect in our natal chart. In astrology, Saturn is the ruler of two signs traditionally. The sign of Capricorn mainly, and then in traditional astrology, the sign of Aquarius. In modern astrology, Uranus is considered to be the ruler of the sign of Aquarius. But in traditional astrology, Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius. In archetypal astrology, Saturn is seen as the boss figure, the CEO. Because I like things to be a bit lighter and a bit more fun, I kind of envisage Saturn as kind of the head of control in the Get Smart series. If you're familiar with the Chief, he's managing all these bumbling idiots all around him trying to catch the bad guys. And here is the Chief just trying to keep everything under control, managed, well organized, well structured, and adhering to what needs to happen and the rules and principles of control in the series Get Smart. But he's still likable. A lot of people will paint Saturn to be the boogeyman of the horoscope. He's out to get you. He makes life tough. He's negative. And certainly some streams of astrology see him as the great malefic. I kind of liken him instead to the great father figure in the sky. If you imagine a father who's, his daughter or son is 16 and they're about to go out to a party, and dad, the father figure, is sitting there and as they run out the front door and says, "Hang on, what time are you going to be home? Where are you going? I want the phone number of the place where you're going to be. Are there going to be any other adults at the party? You've got to do things properly, by the book. There's no being silly, and I want you home by 10 o'clock. And the children are like, "Oh, Dad." But Dad's strict and firm and doesn't budge an inch. He sets boundaries. He says, "No way, home by 10 o'clock. You're not going to be one of those children who's out running around the streets at all hours of the night, getting up to no good." So he is this protector, father figure energy, authority figure energy in the horoscope. Now, sometimes we see people manifesting Saturn in a very negative way. They are the authority figure with abuse and violence and control. Now, often that would indicate a connection with Mars in a chart if that's how it was playing out. But then there are other people who manifest beautiful Saturn energy that's benevolent. That is, lots of boundaries, lots of regulations and rules, but it's for your greater good. It's for your upliftment. It's for the betterment of yourself, society, humanity, whatever. So there are many ways Saturn can manifest, but he is always the energy of this protector father figure. Even in karmic astrology, Saturn represents our fears that we have from previous incarnations. For example, if you happen to fall off, and many people who've had readings with me will have heard this analogy, if you happen to in a past life fall off the Grand Canyon to plummet to your death, and then you reincarnate and you've got this fear of heights you can't explain, that's Saturn putting protective boundaries of fear in place so that you don't go and fall off the Grand Canyon again and plummet to your death in the next life. So he is very much about our psychic protection or karmic protection, and sometimes people see him as a representation of karmic blockage, based on the hurts and the wounds and the fears we've experienced in past incarnations. According to the reading I've done, Saturn rules the gemstone qualities of obsidian, also tourmaline and hematite, the heavy black stones that are, in the case of tourmaline especially, particularly good at absorbing energy. Saturn also correlates to the color brown, which is why for this series I'm dressing in very autumnal tones of brown. And as a ruler of the earth sign of Capricorn, Saturn is a very earthy type of planet and it has a lot of earth energy about him. And so one of the remedies that we can offer for any Saturn troubled times is to be in nature or to walk barefoot on the earth. Saturn also rules rocks and gravelly soil and rocky places. Isolated places do come under Saturn's governance occasionally as well. So to be in those places is actually to be in a Saturnian environment, or to live in a garden full of rocks or a house that's made of stone is a very Saturnian environment to live in. Saturn also governs things like minimalism and restraint and restriction. If we were to have Saturn sitting permanently in our first house, then we might find that our body was restricted in some way, either through our size is restricted, or our height. So either our outward expression or our upward expression would be restricted. Saturn would be affecting our body in that way. So he rules restriction and restraint. So that's a little, in a nutshell, picture of what Saturn as a planet represents. Now we're going to dive into what it means to have Saturn transiting through the houses. But first, let's start with an explanation of how to assess where Saturn is according to whole sign astrology by transit. So when Saturn transits the 4th house in whole sign astrology, what that means is Saturn is currently in the sky moving through the 4th sign from our rising sign. So we can work that out by looking at where our rising sign happens to be. Let's use this for an example. Currently Saturn is moving through the sign of Aquarius. So 4 signs will make Scorpio the rising sign. So we've got the 1st house, Scorpio, the rising sign, 1st house. 2nd house, Sagittarius. 3rd house, Capricorn in whole sign astrology. And the 4th house, Aquarius. This is the video for you. Now, if you happen to be watching this in say 5 or 6 years time and Saturn's no longer in the sign of Aquarius, you'll need to work this out by going to a website like www.planetwatcher.com to see where Saturn currently is, what sign Saturn is currently in, and you'll need to work out where that sign happens to fall in your horoscope. So you'll need to know your rising sign, see where Saturn is, and where does that particular sign that Saturn sits in, where does that fall in your chart? Let's say, we're looking a few years down the track, you're Scorpio rising, but Saturn, a few years on happens to be over in Gemini. Well, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 houses. So you'd need to watch the video for Saturn transiting the 8th house at that stage. Hope that makes sense. But right now, let's stick with the example of Scorpio, and that is only an example. Depends on, like I said, what year you happen to be watching this video. But for the year 2020 through to 2022-23, we're looking at Saturn being in the sign of Aquarius. So for Scorpio rising people, this is your 4th house. If this doesn't make sense and you don't understand how to figure this out, then leave a note in the comments section. I or one of my other beautiful subscribers or followers would be delighted to help you figure out where Saturn is transiting and therefore which house he is currently in for you. So this is the fourth house that we're looking at. And so the fourth house is anything to do in Western astrology with our heritage, where we've come from, particularly the maternal line, the maternal lineage, our roots, our lineage. It has to do with, the fourth house has to do with our mother, the mother figure, and our actual physical bricks and mortar home. It has to do with security and safety and protection, as well as our deepest emotions too. So the fourth house represents a lot of different things. And when Saturn's transiting here, he's going to influence all these things in our life. So he'll be here for roughly 2.5 to 3 years, transiting this house in order to create new foundations for future success. Because if you look at how this falls in the horoscope, the fourth house is the lowest house in the horoscope. It is the foundation. And of course, our lineage, where we come from, that's the foundation for who we are in this lifetime. Our home is the foundation for where we live, where we pull ourselves back together after a really shitty day or a hard day out at the job or whatever. Our home should be our foundation, our retreat space. And so there's so many ways that the fourth house lines up with the idea of being the foundation for our lives. So it is here where Saturn's transiting here that he's going to be building a new foundation for us for future success. So because of the nature of Saturn, there's actually a slow, focused effort that's required to rebuild these structures and foundations of our life. It's not a time when Saturn transits the fourth house when you should be expecting big rewards and gains and promotions and, out of the world kind of successes and everything in life. That doesn't tend to happen during this 2.5 to 3 year transit. So don't expect any great accomplishments unless there's something else stronger playing out in your chart personally. Generally, this is what we see with Saturn's transit of the fourth. But you're building a new life for yourself now. You are structuring your foundations with great perseverance. That's the focus and the energy right now. The reason behind all this, the motivating factor behind all this, is the desire to create material stability for your future. When Saturn leaves the fourth house, so it'll start whenever Saturn moves into the sign that is your fourth house, it'll last 2.5 to 3 years. And then when Saturn leaves and moves into your fifth house, that's when you will notice the financial material rewards starting to manifest in your life. Up until that point, you are working hard with what Saturn is requiring of you. So that will be in the fourth house, connected to creating security and stability for yourself at a financial level, at a material level. So maybe it might be that you're working really hard to pay off your mortgage over this period to really get to that final point where finally you are mortgage free, and wouldn't we all like to be there? Or maybe you're working really hard to restructure your relationships with family and loved ones. So you might be doing a lot of study while your husband or wife earns money, and then at the end of this period you have restructured your life so that you can go out there and create greater financial stability and success for yourself after you graduate or you get the certificate you need or whatever it happens to be. So it's a time of persevering with the restructuring with the intent of creating greater material stability for yourself in the future. Now, this is an incredibly introspective house, and with Saturn here, that doesn't go away. It becomes a very introspective time when you've got Saturn transiting through the fourth house. And you'll be very concerned with material survival. Like I said, it's introspective, looking at the self, what's of value to you, what is important to you, and materially, what satisfies, in what way do you feel protected, in what way do you feel safe, what do you need materially to feel safe and secure and protected in the world. It's very, fourth house likes protection and that insulating sort of nurturing kind of womb-like, if you like, environment where everything's okay, you're being taken care of, everything's under control. So you will be very, very introspective about those sorts of things. You know, how can you create that in your life? How can you create more protection for your experience? So it's a time of saving money. It's a time of building for the future, like might be developing new skills for the future, doing some sort of course that's going to get you more money in the future, bit of study or something. It might be a slow focused effort on paying off some kind of material debts so that you're debt free, that sort of thing. So time for saving, time for building for the future, time for organizing, time for planning and restructuring to create this future stability and security that we all desire at some point in our lives. So it can actually represent Saturn's transit through the fourth house, a time when we might have some problems with our physical home. So that can be, maybe there are issues with the foundations of your home, and it's starting to sag in one corner and you need to get the foundations redone, or maybe there's some restructuring and rebuilding that needs to happen. Maybe you need to renovate. These are Saturn related things. Saturn does tend to make our homes, Saturn's transit through the fourth house does tend to make our homes feel a little outdated, a little worn out, a little bit old. Now either we can wait until Saturn's left the fourth house and we can then invest in sort of sprucing things up, invigorating, making things fresh and new looking again. Once we've sort of settled with some stability and security that Saturn represents in the fourth house. So the focus is not so much on beautifying our home when Saturn goes through the fourth house. Really, it's more about restructuring the home, fixing dodgy foundations or crumbling walls, or putting some rocks in the garden or something to sort of give it more structure or whatever. That's where the focus is, not so much making things pretty. We can actually move homes, move towns, move cities, move countries when we have a Saturn transit to the fourth house. There might need to be other things that are indicated in a chart or a solar return chart coupled with that as well. But when Saturn is transiting the fourth house, this is a period where we can change where we live. The motivation for changing where we live will actually tend to come from a more serious reason, rather than, I want to go have fun and live at Malibu or, whatever, live in the Alps and go skiing every day. It's much more connected to, where can I live that will make my future more safe, more secure? Where can I live that will create a better future for me and maybe my family as well, here in the fourth house? So you'll be focused around that as your motivation for choosing a new place to live, and that will be the direction that you take. So for example, if you had Uranus transiting the fourth house, you might be more inclined to look for a new place to live based on, you want to mix things up, you want a bit of diversity, you want to have feel a bit more free. Saturn's very different. It's much more about moving for the sake and changing your place of living for the sake of responsibilities, duties, obligations, and maturely looking at your life and where it's taking you. So essentially, you'll move to create more security and stability in your life in some way. Now, you need to be more responsible during a Saturn transit of the fourth house for your domestic environment, for your home. So that might mean paying someone to come and fix up the foundations of your house, or it might mean, being responsible for how things run in your home, who does what. You might need to create some charts, and I know I used to have with my children, for example, tick a chart if you made your bed today, tick a box if you made a bed, or you've cleaned your room, or, you might need to create some structure and organization around how your domestic environment runs, and what chores go to which person and who does what and how things function. You'll be a lot more mature and disciplined about the home life in that regard. This is the house of the parents, particularly the mother, and Saturn transiting here can bring us a lot more responsibilities and duties with our mother. So we might find that, mum may get sick, or mum might be feeling lonely or something like that. Sometimes it's the nurturing, caring parent, which can be the father figure in our life that is that to us. But either way, it's the nurturing, caring parent, male or female. And we can need to, give our time and our energy. Saturn is time, and we give our time to our nurturing parent at this stage. So, looking after mum if she's sick, or giving our time and attention if she's feeling lonely. A lot more duties, a lot more responsibilities with regard to parents at this time. Watch your mother or your nurturing father, if that's what you have. Watch their health. That it is, research has shown that when Saturn transits the 4th house of the family lineage, that one or the other of the parents can actually get a little bit ill, or might have some, difficulties with their bones or their teeth, maybe some susceptible to colds and that sort of thing. So do look out for your parents when you're having this transit. But it's a really good transit to explore psychological healing, because this is the house of our inner deepest emotions, where we feel most comfortable, where we feel most ourselves. So by exploring where we feel most comfortable, where we feel, our truest self, then we can actually have some quite profound psychological breakthroughs at this time by digging deep with that sort of thing. So explore psychological healing options, that are available to you, particularly for any genetic or lineage type problems. Maybe there's a genetic ailment that you've carried through, or your family have a propensity to need to hip replacements by the time they're 40. So you might start to, think a lot about that and look for healing around that, and perhaps put some health insurance in place to cover that. You look at your genetic lineage, you get a bit thoughtful about it, a bit dutiful, a bit responsible about your genetic lineage, but also your psychological lineage in this house as well. So look at any psychological hang-ups that exist in your lineage, where you've come from, your family line. See, maybe there's a history of insanity running through your family. Maybe you might need to go and get some psychological treatment to make sure you're not carrying that kooky gene, or whatever it happens to be. That's a silly explanation. But this Saturn placement can bring those issues out now. Issues with lineage, issues with genetics. Can also bring up genetic traumas. Like it's been well documented that people who lived through Auschwitz actually genetically passed on the fears and the traumas of Auschwitz genetically into their children. So we need to perhaps look at our genetic traumas and the crisis events that may have shaped our family, and how they might be playing out down through the generations. And this is actually a really good time to explore those sorts of things through psychological, as I said a moment ago, psychological analysis right now. You can have a big psychological leap forward because of, if you head into this realm and explore it. You will also get the opportunity through this transit to better understand your upbringing, your childhood, your ancestry. It will all kind of make sense. You might even start getting into researching your family history, doing some online research, or visiting, depending on what else is happening in your chart, but visiting the family country that you all emigrated from, or the town that your parents grew up in, or something. Connecting with your lineage will actually be a thing for you at some point over the next 2.5 to 3 years. So it's a really good time for taking stock of everything in your life. Where have you come from? Where do you want to go? What sort of security and stability do you want to set in place for your life in the future? What subtle inner transformations need to unravel, genetic traumas, psychological traumas that exist there? What needs to be brought to the surface and exposed and restructured and rebuilt in order to create a securer, more beneficial future for yourself? In order to create structures that will last for the next 30, 40, 50 years of your life. This is a very deep transit that will bring you in touch at quite a profound level with your inner self. Now, in Hindu astrology, of course, things are a little different, how it works. So let's explore a bit of that too. This is considered to be a very difficult transit when Saturn transits an angular house, and in this case, the 4th house. There's obstacles, restrictions, and blockages in home, health, career, and image that arise when we have Saturn transiting through the 4th house in the Hindu system. So there's a need for discipline, a need for self-centering, and a need for endurance and perseverance through this 2.5 to 3 year period more than anything. So as I said, there can be blockages around home, restrictions around home, obstacles around home, like difficulties with the actual structure of your home, difficulties with being able to use your home the way you want it to, difficulties in your domestic arrangements. Maybe you've got more people than can fit in your house, living in your house, and it's driving you a bit bonkers. And so there can be frustrations that occur with your home life and your home environment when Saturn transits the 4th in Hindu. And of course, it's aspecting the 6th house here, and it's also aspecting the 10th here and the 1st here. So with those aspects, there's an aspect that is considered challenging, full of obstacles, restrictions, and blockages to your health, your well-being, your ability to fight off disease and poverty and so forth, with the aspect to the 6th house. So there can be blockages and restrictions with getting ahead in that regard. And then similarly the aspect from the 4th house Saturn to the 10th house of Saturn, the 10th house in this case, is restrictions and blockages around career and worldly achievements that could be frustrating you as well. And of course, these kind of tie in. This is our, can be our work and our routine. And here in the 10th house, it's about our legacy that we want to leave and the worldly achievements we want to accomplish, and there can be restrictions and blockages Saturn is sending in that direction as well. And finally, our image is seen by the 1st house, how we show up in the world, how the world perceives us, what the impression is that we give to the world. And with the Saturn sending aspects to the 1st house, there can be issues regarding that as well. How we show up might be blocked. We might want to be very visible on YouTube, and somehow it keeps getting stymied and stifled, and we just don't get our message out there because our image is blocked, and how we present to the world is blocked. Or there are restrictions in some way, or our health or our body suffers, because this is a house of health, and so is the 6th house and 1st house are both houses of health. So in that sense, there can be obstacles, health obstacles, well-being obstacles, mental issues and problems with our mental health that can result from the Hindu consideration of Saturn's transit through the 4th house. But that's it in a nutshell for Saturn moving through the 4th house in the horoscope. I hope this has been insightful for you. Please join me for the video next in this series next week, all about Saturn's transit through the 5th house.